Moscow points the blame at Ukraine for a string of drone attacks on the Russian capital, which had no fatalities.
The EU's discussing a new Russian influence commission in Poland amid concerns it could be used to bar opposition politicians from standing for office.
The Arctic Challenge exercise is underway with Norway, Sweden and Finland coordinating the aerial combat training maneuvers. Over 600 migrants have docked in the southern Italian city of Bari after being rescued on Saturday from an overpacked fishing boat off the coast of Sicily.
Officials in Russia continue to point the blame on Kyiv for a string of drone attacks on Moscow. President Putin's spokesperson Dmitry Peskov said Tuesday's strikes on the Russian capital were in retaliation for the recent attacks on the Ukrainian capital Kyiv. They also accused Western countries for supporting Ukraine. Moscow's Ministry of Defense says its air defense forces shot down 8 drones and that there were no fatalities. For Moscovites, this is indeed a sensitive issue.
Не очень, конечно, приятно слышать то, что рядом с твоим домом летают боевые дроны, но это очень тяжелая ситуация на самом деле. Ой, не хотелось бы, чтобы такое ощущал человек, чтобы в 7 утра тебя поднимали из дому и говорили, что эвакуация.
Война есть война, поэтому тут, ребят, надо трезво оценивать и понимать, кто с кем воюет и почему. А что бояться? Того, что быть, того не миновать. Тут надо понимать. Мы можем выйти на улицу, завтра нас машина собьет, понимаете? Не надо нервничать, не надо долетать, пожалуйста. Не надо долетать. Все хорошо.
Kyiv made no direct comment on the attack, which is one of the fiercest Moscow has seen since its full-scale invasion of Ukraine began 15 months ago. According to Russian President Vladimir Putin, Russia has responded by striking a Ukrainian military intelligence headquarters.
Yet another attack on Kyiv overnight, the third within roughly just 24 hours. On Tuesday night, Ukrainian air defenses destroyed 29 of 31 Iran-made Shahed drones launched at Kyiv by Russia. The Institute for the Study of War previously assessed that Russian forces began a new limited air campaign in recent months to degrade Ukrainian counteroffensive capabilities, but that the Russian prioritization of targeting Kyiv is likely further limiting the campaign's ability to meaningfully constrain potential Ukrainian counteroffensive actions. President Volodymyr Zelensky said on Monday the timing of Ukraine's long-anticipated counteroffensive has been set. Quote, "The decisions have been made," he said, without providing further details. After the attack on Kyiv, drones hit several buildings in Moscow, causing minor damage and no serious injuries, the mayor of the Russian capital said early on Tuesday. Moscow is located around 500 kilometers away from Ukraine's border and has only rarely been targeted by drone attacks since the start of the Russian full-scale invasion, even though such attacks have been more common elsewhere in Russia. Previously, there have been reports of drones being shot down in Kursk and Belgorod regions of Russia, which both border Ukraine. In April, a drone came down in the town of Kireevsk, about 400 kilometers from the Ukrainian border, injuring at least 3 people in an explosion after it was brought down, Russian state media said. An oil refinery at the Krasnodar region of Russia, about 200 kilometers from the Crimean border, was targeted by drones on the 4th and the 5th of May, according to Russian media reports. A suspected drone attack injured over 10 Russian soldiers at a military training ground in the Voronezh region. Now, Russia's Ministry of Defense has claimed that Ukraine is responsible for what it straight away called a terrorist attack using drones against Moscow on Tuesday morning. Ukraine has denied direct involvement with an alleged drone attack on the Russian capital.
The rule of law and EU values in Poland and Hungary topped the agenda of a meeting of the EU General Affairs Council in Brussels today. There's particular concern over the recent creation in Poland of a special commission of inquiry into Russian influence. Its decisions could be used to bar citizens, including politicians, from public office without review by an independent judge.
It's a special concern and the Commission will analyse the legislation, but will not hesitate to take measures if it's needed, because it's impossible to agree on such a system without a real access to justice, to an independent judge against an administrative decision. So we have a lot of things to say today about Hungary and certainly Poland.
The commission was signed into law by Polish President Andrzej Duda on Monday. It has been described as unconstitutional by the opposition and some legal experts as the country prepares for a general election in the autumn. The body will scrutinise possible Kremlin influence over Polish governments from 2007, during which time the Civic Platform Party of Donald Tusk was in power.
An exercise to cope with the worst-case scenario as Russia's invasion of Ukraine rages on. The armies of Finland, Norway and Sweden are participating in the 6th edition of the Arctic Challenge exercise, or ACE. Their air forces are undergoing combat exercises with different aircrafts.
Den ekstra viktig I år, nettopp fordi at det en endring I Europa, det krig. Og vi I Norden nødt til å vise at vi står sammen, og det gjør vi med denne øvelsen.
The ACE concludes on June 9th and is one of Europe's largest air exercises. A US-owned aircraft carrier, the world's largest warship, visited Oslo last week and is expected to head north to participate in drills with Norwegian and other NATO partners.
The NATO-led peacekeeping force in Kosovo, KFOR, says the number of its troops injured in clashes with ethnic Serbs on Monday has risen to 30. The protesters were trying to occupy a government building in northern Kosovo. The municipality is now in the hands of the Kosovar Albanian minority after the Serb majority boycotted recent local elections. 11 of the wounded soldiers, some of whom are seriously injured, are from Italy. Prime Minister Giorgia Meloni condemned the attack and said further action of this kind wouldn't be tolerated. Serbian President Aleksandar Vučić, however, defended the Serbian position and blamed Kosovar Prime Minister Albin Kurti for the unrest. Vučić spent the night with Serbian troops stationed near the border with Kosovo.
Rasporedili smo u skladu sa situacijom naše snage na mestima gdje mislimo da je to neophodno. Mi ćemo noćas više mesta sa našim vojnicima obići. Nećemo dozvoliti pogrom srpskog naroda.
Dozens of ethnic Serb civilians were also injured in Monday's clashes. Tension has been rising between the Balkan neighbours. Last week, Serbia put its border forces on high alert.
The second round of the Turkish presidential elections, which resulted in the re-election of Recep Tayyip Erdogan, was free but not fair, international observers said on Monday. One major factor, they said, was the candidate's access to the media, with incumbent Erdogan having a much greater media presence than his opponent Kemal Kılıçdaroğlu.
As in the first round, biased media coverage and the lack of a level playing field gave an unjustified advantage to the incumbent.
Adult daughter or adult son.
Both candidates came under criticism for targeting minority groups.
I really would like to urge, Farah as well, to refrain after the campaign from violent speeches, hate speeches, against minorities, whether it's LGBTIQ from one side of the political spectrum, or if it's refugees, what we unfortunately saw in the second round from the other side of the political spectrum.
Erdogan has the thorny mission of tackling an economy hit by rampant inflation and managing the reconstruction of areas affected by the February earthquakes. The Turkish lira plunged to record lows against the dollar on news of his election victory. The ceasefire in Sudan between government forces and rival paramilitary Rapid Support Forces has been extended for another 5 days. Earlier ceasefires have proven fragile in the past, having been flouted by both sides. Monday saw renewed fighting in the area of the capital, Khartoum. Since the war began in mid-April, at least 886 civilians have been killed and thousands wounded, according to the Sudanese Doctors Association. They say the death toll could possibly be much higher. The war has also displaced nearly 1.5 million people, both internally and to neighboring countries.
A humanitarian vessel carrying over 600 migrants reached the southern Italian port of Bari on Tuesday. Among the migrants were 151 minors. 20 of them were under 13 years of age. 11 women were also on board. Several passengers required medical attention after the arduous journey. Some of the migrants, coming from Syria, Bangladesh, Palestine, Egypt or Pakistan, were rescued on Saturday in the Sicilian Channel after a harrowing 4-day crossing on a fishing boat. During this time, they faced dire conditions with limited food and water supplies. It took the vessel, operated by the NGO Doctors Without Borders, 3 hours to complete the rescue under the supervision of the Italian Coast Guard.
Archaeologists in Pompeii, Italy have found the remains of another 3 victims of the catastrophic eruption of Mount Vesuvius in 79 AD. The skeletons have been uncovered at the site of an ancient Roman bakery. 2 women apparently tried to hide there with their 3 to 4-year-old child.
Il ritrovamento di 3 vittime dell'eruzione ha messo insieme tutta una squadra di archeologi, antropologi, vulcanologi, sismologi, archeobotanici che lavorano insieme per cavare il massimo dei dati da questi rinvenimenti.
Recent discoveries have been made thanks to the Great Pompeii project launched in 2012. Over 100 million euros have been put into the conservation and excavation of the ancient Roman city, buried by ash and pumice from the volcanic eruption.